Hello everyone, welcome to Pro Strings and this free class on playing in tune. My name is Henriette. I'm a violin teacher from the UK and I'm delighted to meet you in this webinar today. Pro Strings is an online platform where players of the violin and the viola, both professionals and amateurs, come together and share their enjoyment of playing a string instrument. Our goal is to help you develop your string playing technique and so increase your ability to play and your enjoyment of music making. We hope you enjoy this free class. On the Pro Strings website, there is more on offer about the same subject. There are technique videos, a blog and repertoire lists. You may also send us a video of your own playing and we'll send you a video lesson back in our video exchange lessons. All the materials on the website are integrated and together form a comprehensive overview of the technique that you're looking to develop. So for instance, you may start by attending a class such as this one today, then check out our video on the same subject, consult our repertoire lists about what pieces you may discover next, or you may decide that you would like some more individual input into your playing and book a Skype lesson. We have a team of outstanding and experienced, but above all, very friendly teachers on the violin and the viola, and they are across the globe to help you with any individual queries that you may have. Our customers too come from all over the world and have consistently rated us outstanding in all that we do. Do visit our website, www.proamstrings.com, for more information. The subject of this class today is playing in tune, and I will tell you all about important aspects about playing in tune, but I will also show you exercises that you can do at home. This video will remain on the Facebook group for you to access again at a later stage. Please have your instrument ready and join in if you like. If you have any questions, do please email me afterwards on info@proamstrings.com, or if you want more individual input, book a Skype lesson through the website. And this is the way that Pro Strings works. Some people come in and out of the service to find the one thing they need, and others may carry on having lessons with us for longer term development of their playing. We try to be as flexible as we can, and we want you, the customer, always to be our first priority. Today, we're talking about playing in tune. I will first discuss what playing in tune actually is, and then I will take you through some aspects of playing in tune and how you can develop your own playing in tune. We will also briefly touch on advanced intonation, and finally I will show you some exercises you can do at home to make it easier to play in tune. When I ask my students, do you know what playing in tune actually is? They generally answer something along the lines of just when it sounds right, and that is true to a certain extent. It may be the case that when it does not sound right, intonation may be one of the reasons why it doesn't. What we are looking for in perfect intonation is a certain brightness, a certain clarity and beauty of sound that you don't get when a note is slightly out of tune. The note may then sound dull or lifeless, not as bright and shiny as it would be, as it is perfectly in tune. When you play a note on a string instrument, apart from the fundamental note, overtones are produced at certain frequencies, which will help to give that note that you're playing its quality. If a note is even the slightest bit out of tune, some overtones will not ring, and that is why you get a slightly duller sound. I'm not going to delve deeply into the acoustics of sound here, but I will try to explain what I mean in a very simplified version. I will always imagine a note as a circle with a dot in the middle. And when a note is perfectly played in tune, you hit the dot precisely in the middle with your finger. However, if your finger presses a string down in the area around the dot, so in the rest of the circle, but not in the middle, precisely on the dot, a less than perfect note will be produced. If you imagine that circle, it will help us to think about what we can do to improve our intonation. And there are two key areas how you can improve your intonation. First, there is the mental aspect. We need to sing the note in our heads while we play. And for best results, we will always need to imagine hearing the note before we actually play it. And this is a phase of development which is crucial, especially in the early stages of learning to play a string instrument. And this is one of the reasons why playing early on must be very slow. You can try this for yourself at home. Choose a piece you are confident to play. Play the first note, then sing the next one. Now play that note that you've just sung, and you want to ask yourself the question, does it sound exactly the same as the note that you had in mind? Next, sing the next note out loud and then play it on your instrument. And then you compare the two with what you sung and what you actually heard. And so you carry on, constantly judging if what you play is exactly the same as what you have sung. And this is a very useful exercise to learn to listen better. It will also encourage you to listen to what is actually sounding as opposed to listening to what you want to hear. So it is an exercise in increasing your listening attention span. How often do we play something and at the same time think about something else we have planned for that day? Making a shopping list, for instance, or deciding what's for dinner, not really paying attention to the intonation. When we practice intonation and we make a habit of listening more deeply, as I would call it, gradually over time, our hearing will sharpen up and we'll start to hear better what is in tune and what is not. And eventually you will get into a habit of not taking playing very closely in tune as perfectly in tune. So these are the mental aspects of playing in tune, but there are also the physical aspects of playing in tune. Where do I place my fingers so that I play in tune? First of all, where you place your fingers will depend on the key, the musical key of the piece that you're playing. For instance, a piece that has sharps in its key signature will require a different finger pattern than a piece with flats in its key signature. Which fingers are placed next to one another and which ones have gaps in between is helpful as a rough guide to intonation. I call this the geography of the keyboard. Where are the notes that I'm going to play? Frequent tuning with open strings is key here to help your intonation. But good intonation goes further than this. We want to ingrain in our fingers not only where the individual notes are, but also where your fingers are placed in relation to your other fingers. Making a habit of leaving your fingers down on the string while you play will encourage the feel of your fingers in relation to your other fingers. And once you are confident checking your notes with open strings, you may progress to playing double stops to encourage the feeling of the relationships between your fingers. And I would say that when you are about grade 5 or over, you want to make double stop playing a regular feature of your daily routine, just to encourage that geography of the fingerboard and the feel of the relationships from one finger to the next. You will also need to make sure that whenever you practice intonation, you do not use vibrato, because we want to hear where perfectly in tune is. And when you play with vibrato, this obscures the intonation. So it is really counterproductive in playing perfectly in tune. However, once you have mastered perfect tuning in a section of music, use your vibrato again to make that section more expressive. It also helps when you practice playing in tune when you use more bow, because having a better tone will make it easier for you to hear the intonation. So when you are practicing for tuning and when you play scales or any passage of music, make sure that you've got a good bowing technique, because it makes hearing the notes so much easier. In position changing, of course, we need to pay doubly attention to the intonation, and using a guide note, or some people call it an auxiliary note, will greatly help the feel of one finger to the next. So as a golden rule in shifting, you always want to play the last note played in the old position as your first note in the new position. And I will shortly demonstrate what I mean by this, and we'll get into a slightly grey area between the technique of intonation, the technique of playing in tune, and the technique of position changing, but I'll come to that in a minute. Just a word now about more advanced intonation. When we play a string instrument, we are lucky, or some may even say we are unlucky, to use just tuning as opposed to tempered tuning, which is used to tune a piano, for instance. In tempered tuning, all the intervals, and by this I mean the distances between the notes, are the same, which in acoustics is not strictly the case, as the tuning depends on the function of a particular note, within the harmony. And depending on the role each note plays within the chord, intonation may sometimes be different from when this same note performs a different function in a different chord. This is useful knowledge when you play in an ensemble, for instance. If you play in a string quartet, you may want to experiment with this idea and find out for yourself when to play a note slightly sharp. And the easiest note to start with is perhaps the leading note, the raised seventh in a minor scale, which will need to be played slightly sharper to enhance the intonation of the chord as a whole. I will very shortly show you some exercises to help you advance your intonation, regardless of whether you're just setting out on your intonation journey or whether you already have progressed to intermediate level, or even if you're already an advanced player wanting to improve your intonation. The golden rule of intonation is that you must always play on your fingertips. The smaller the contact point of your finger is with the string, the more precise your intonation. You can imagine if your fingers are playing flatter on the string. Let me show this to you. I have got a bigger space where my fingertip presses down the string. However, if I play my fingers more rounded, just going to go this way around now and hopefully you can see it, I have got a much smaller area where my fingertip touches the string, so my intonation can be much more precise. So when we aim to play on our fingertips, it really helps if you have your fingers high above the fingerboard, and in general I would say this row of knuckles where your fingers are joined onto your hand should be level with the E string. Okay, so quite a lot of times I get people playing like this, and you can see that this row of knuckles is way down below the level of the strings. So if this is you, if this looks like your hand, see if you can roll up your fingers more, bend them more, and get your row of knuckles here higher so that it's level with the string. Okay. So this is one idea about the row of this knuckle, and that your fingers are higher above the string. This way also your fingers will fall from above, and that gives you much better intonation because it's more pinpointed intonation than when your hand is much lower and your fingers are much flatter. Another thing that I sometimes see is when people play with their wrists like this. Again, you can see when your wrist is like that, it encourages your fingers to go much flatter. And that is very easily solved by pushing your wrist out. And you can see what happens to the shape of my fingers. I'll show you this again. Look, if your wrist looks like this, my fingers are flat on the strings here. And if I push my wrist out, my fingers get far better on their fingertips. I'm just turning around so you can see. I'm doing it this way, look. Can you see my fingers go flat? Pushing the wrist out brings my fingers round and on their fingertips. Your left thumb should be resting lightly against the fingerboard. So it's resting there, but it's not squeezing it. Okay? Generally, you would say that your left thumb should be so that the tip of your thumb is just peeking over the edge of the fingerboard. So if this is you, that has implications for your fingers, because I'll show you this from this angle. Look, my fingers go much flatter. Okay, so if your thumb drops down, I'll show you this from this end again. Take a look at what the difference in the shape of my fingers is. My fingers come much more upright when my thumb is there. Now, officially, your left thumb should be somewhere in between your index finger and middle finger, and there can be some individual variation, but your thumb shouldn't go behind your index finger, because that encourages your wrist to go that way, and it shouldn't go above there either, because you create other difficulties that way. So somewhere in between your index and middle fingers is the right position for your left thumb. And then there's one more aspect that we need to think about when we are playing with good intonation, and that is our left elbow. Sometimes I see people play like this with their elbow sticking out to the left, to your left, to the left of the player, and that angles my fingers sideways on the string. You can see that doesn't give you good intonation at all. So what we say is bring your elbow a little bit further under the violin, and I would even go much further than that. If I play in the third position and I'm playing the fourth finger on the G string, your elbow needs to come much further under the violin. You can see that my elbow is now really coming out from underneath the violin, the other side. Okay, but in general we would say if you play in the first position, your elbow, your left elbow, should be immediately underneath your fingertips, and that helps give your fingertips a good balance. And if they are balanced nicely, then your intonation will be much better. So these are just a couple of thoughts, just to check your posture and your general hold of the left hand, which will immensely help improve your intonation. Now, earlier I was giving you two more thoughts, and one was that I said when we play position changes, use the auxiliary note to help with the position changes. Now, I'm thinking I'm going to shift from, what shall I do? I'm going to shift from the first finger on the E string to the third finger on the E string. So I'm going from an F sharp to a C sharp. Now, a minute ago, I told you that the golden rule in position changing is that you play the last played finger in the old position as your first played finger in the new position. Watch how this is going to help with my intonation. I'm going to play from F sharp first to a first finger in the third position. And now I'm in the right position. Now I can easily find the C sharp. When you practice it like that with the auxiliary note A, which is the first finger in third position on the E string, it is much easier to find the third position and to find your finger shape in relation to that first finger. I also mentioned that sometimes different notes have got different functions in chords. If you play a first finger on the A string, B, and you combine that note with an open E string, excuse me, that B is very different from where you combine that first finger B on the A string with an open D string. And I suggest you try this at home, and you will find that if you play the first finger B on the A string together with an open E string, your finger is in a very different place to play in tune when you play that same B first finger on the A string together with the D string. I'll leave you to try that out at home. Okay. So I'm hoping that you have gained some ideas about how you too can play with a perfect intonation, because it is possible, and I hope you've gained some inspiration on how you can practice your intonation. Just two more things before I go. Some people say that nowadays you can find everything for free on the internet, and it is daft to pay for online materials. And I hope that from this webinar, this free class today, you have been able to gauge the quality of the teaching at Pro Strings. Take a look at our products. For instance, the video using your left-hand fingers on the Pro Strings website, and you'll find lots more that may be of interest to you. Thank you for watching, and I hope to meet you again soon. Bye.